Beneath every civilization lies a hidden kingdom. Across time and continents, humans have looked down into the earth and envisioned a sacred underworld. This is not one story but 30, a tapestry of timeless legends woven from our deepest hopes and fears. By the end of this journey, you will possess a map of the human soul's greatest mystery, the many realms believed to wait below. We will visit a Sumerian goddess stripped of her power at 7 gates and stand before the Egyptian scales that weigh a heart against a feather. Why did cultures from the frozen north to the steaming jungles imagine such elaborate worlds for the dead? And what do these dark mirrors reveal about the living? Which of these hidden realms feels most like a truth whispered from the depths? Our journey begins in the dust and clay of ancient Sumer, a civilization so old its myths echo like the first stories ever told. Here, the underworld was not a place of final judgment but a stark, silent realm called Ker, a land of no return ruled by the formidable goddess Ereshkigal. To understand Ker, we must follow the most ambitious traveler who ever dared to enter it, the Queen of Heaven herself, Inanna. She was the goddess of love, war, and political power, a being of radiant authority. Yet she chose to abandon her celestial throne and descend into the great below. Her stated reason was to attend the funeral rites of Ereshkigal's husband, but the deeper truth was a challenge. Inanna sought to confront her sister's absolute power, to expand her own dominion into the one realm that defied her. Her journey was a systematic unraveling. Before her stood the 7 gates of Ker, each one a threshold of surrender. At the first gate, the guardian demanded her crown, at the second, her royal rod. Gate by gate, she was stripped of every symbol of her divine identity, her lapis lazuli necklace, her sparkling breastplate, every article of clothing that marked her as the Queen of Heaven. This was not mere robbery, it was a profound ritual of deconstruction. To enter the land of the dead, you could not bring the trappings of life. By the 7th gate, Inanna stood utterly naked and powerless, bowed low before Ereshkigal's throne. The sister she came to challenge did not argue or fight. Ereshkigal simply fixed the eye of death upon her, and Inanna perished instantly, her corpse hung upon a hook like a piece of meat. This is the core of the legend, a shocking fall from the highest power to the most absolute vulnerability. But the story does not end in stillness. Inanna's loyal minister, pleading with the gods, secured a deal. Using the food and water of life, they revived her, yet the laws of the underworld demanded a substitute. As Inanna ascended back through the 7 gates, reclaiming her attributes one by one, she was followed by a troop of relentless demons, tasked with taking someone else in her place. The legend concludes with her choosing her husband, Dumuzid, to spend half the year in Ker, a decision that explains the barren summer and fertile winter in the Mesopotamian cycle. So what does this first legend teach us? That the sacred underworld is a place of inversion, where even a goddess must become nothing to gain wisdom. It frames death not as an end, but as a transformative passage, a stripping away of the self that is necessary for any true renewal. Inanna's perilous round trip established a pattern we will see again and again, the idea that one must lose everything to return with something greater. From the silent, stark halls of Ker, we travel down the Nile to an underworld of far greater spectacle and moral consequence. For the ancient Egyptians, the realm of the dead was not a land of passive existence, but a perilous obstacle course of the soul known as the Duat. This was a sunless, subterranean landscape of terrifying complexity, a 12-hour journey mirroring the sun god Ra's nightly passage. Here, the deceased navigated through caverns of fire, lakes of boiling water, and a series of daunting gates, each one guarded by a demon whose name you had to know to pass. This was not a journey for the faint of heart, which is why the living provided a guidebook, the famed Book of the Dead. These were not books of spells for power, but a collection of prayers, passwords, and maps, a divine cheat sheet to help the soul survive the nightmares of the Duat and reach the ultimate destination, the Hall of Two Truths. Here, in the hall's hushed and solemn air, the soul faced its final and most profound test, the judgment of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, depicted as a mummified king with green skin symbolizing rebirth, sat enthroned, flanked by a council of 42 assessor gods. But the central drama was a simple, terrifying act of balance. The deceased's heart, believed to be the seat of thought and morality, was placed on one side of a great scale. On the other side rested the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order. This was the weighing of the heart. If the heart, heavy with lies, selfishness, and wrongdoing, tipped the scale, a monstrous beast waited nearby, the devourer, part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile. This creature would consume the heart, condemning the soul to a second, permanent death, a non-existence far worse than any torment. But if the heart was as light as the feather, if one's life was in harmony with Mat, Osiris would speak the words of justification. The soul was declared true of voice and granted passage to the ultimate reward, the field of reeds. This was the Egyptian paradise, a mirror of the Nile's lush, fertile world, but perfected and eternal. Here, the justified dead would work their own plots of land, which miraculously produced abundant harvests without toil, reuniting with their families in a state of peaceful, idealized existence forever. The genius of this legend is its breathtaking moral architecture. It transformed the afterlife from a gloomy fate into a cosmic courtroom where every action in life had a tangible, spiritual weight. It promised not just survival, but a chance for eternal bliss based on ethical conduct, a powerful incentive for a stable, orderly society. While Inanna's story was about power lost and regained, the judgment of Osiris was about character measured and rewarded. It asked a question that would echo through countless underworlds to come. What is the true weight of a life, and can your own heart testify on your behalf? The promise of a paradise like the Field of Reeds, however, was not a universal comfort. For the ancient Greeks, the underworld was a far more complex and often bleak bureaucracy, a kingdom ruled not by a judge but by a sovereign, the stern and implacable god Hades. His realm, which bore his name, was a vast, shadowy dominion beneath the earth, its geography mapped with chilling precision. The journey began at the very edge of life, on the banks of the river Styx, the great boundary of oaths and the final divide. Here, the shades of the dead would gather, clutching the coin placed under their tongue by the living, payment for the grim ferryman Charon. Without the fare, a soul was doomed to wander the shore for 100 years, a forgotten whisper. Once across the dark waters, the soul stood before the three judges of the dead, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. These former kings did not weigh a heart, they reviewed the life itself, delivering a verdict that sent the shade to one of three eternal neighborhoods. For the vast majority, the destination was the Asphodel Meadows, a gray, twilight plain of ghostly flowers. Here, souls existed in a state of listless, forgetful neutrality, a bland afterlife for those whose lives were neither notably good nor evil. It was an eternity of muted echoes, the ultimate mediocrity. But for those judged wicked, the path led down, deeper into the abyss of Tartarus. This was the divine dungeon, a pit of punishment reserved for those who defied the gods themselves. Its inhabitants became archetypes of eternal frustration. There was Sisyphus, the cunning king condemned to forever roll a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down as he neared the summit. And Tantalus, who stole ambrosia from the gods, stood in a pool of water that receded when he tried to drink, beneath fruit-laden branches that pulled away when he reached to eat. Their torments were not of fire and brimstone, but of maddening, unfulfillable desire. In stark contrast, a blessed few, heroes and the especially virtuous, were sent to the Elysian fields. This sun-drenched paradise at the edge of the world offered peace, music, and gentle athletic contests, a reward for a life of glory. Yet even Elysium was not always the final stop, for the most exalted souls could be reborn, offered a chance to drink from the river Lethe, forget their past, and try for a life worthy of eternity once more. This intricate system of reward, punishment, and mundane waiting speaks to a society deeply concerned with justice, legacy, and the consequences of one's actions. But one myth dared to challenge the entire, rigid machinery of Hades: the story of Orpheus, the greatest musician, who descended alive into the underworld to retrieve his beloved wife, Eurydice. His music was so heartbreakingly beautiful it charmed Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog, and moved the cold hearts of Hades and Persephone themselves. They granted his plea on one condition: he must walk back to the world of the living without once looking back to see if she followed. It was a test of faith against despair. Orpheus steps from the sunlight, gripped by a terrible doubt, turned. And in that moment he saw Eurydice's shade pulled back into the darkness forever, her faint farewell hanging in the air. His failure was not one of love, but of trust in the unseen, a poignant reminder that even the most perfect art could not overcome the fundamental law of the underworld, that the dead belong to it. The Greek vision gave us an afterlife segmented by merit, a celestial civil service that reflected their own values of honor, cunning, and tragic fate, where paradise was earned, torment was poetic, and most souls simply faded into the gray. While Greek shades wandered in gray neutrality, a far colder wind blows from the north. In the stark cosmology of the Norse, death was not a single destination but a stark choice dictated by the manner of one's end. For the glorious slain in battle, the Valkyries carried their souls to the golden halls of Valhalla, a warrior's paradise of eternal feasting and preparation. But for everyone else, for those who died of sickness, old age, or simple accident, the journey led down a different, chilling path to the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil, into the mist-shrouded realm of Helheim. This was not a place of fiery punishment, but of a profound and damp cold, a hall of frost and silence ruled by the enigmatic goddess Hel. Daughter of the trickster Loki, Hel was depicted as half alive and half corpse, a being who perfectly embodied her domain's nature, a suspended state between vibrant life and true dissolution. Her hall, Eldjudnir, meaning something like the damp place, was where the vast majority of souls, the common dead, resided. They lived a shadowy, muted existence, echoing their earthly lives but drained of color and warmth, a fate often considered more dreary and sorrowful than terrifying. Yet Helheim was far more than a gloomy retirement home for the dead. It held a terrifying strategic importance in the Norse vision of cosmic destiny, for it was the mustering ground for the final battle, Ragnarök. The prophecies foretold that when the 3 winters of Fimbulvita descended and the bonds of the world loosened, the dead would not sleep. The great wolf Fenrir would break free, the serpent Jormungandr would rise from the sea, and a ship would be built in Helheim itself, a vessel called Naglfar, crafted from the untrimmed fingernails and toenails of the dead. This macabre detail served as a constant, grim reminder to the living to keep themselves groomed, lest they contribute material to the doom of the gods. Most chillingly, this ship would be crewed not by demons but by the inhabitants of Hel. At the command of Loki, freed from his bonds, the army of the dead would sail from the misty shores of Helheim, joining the giants and monsters to march upon the gods on the plain of Vigrid. In this ultimate twilight, even the glorious Einherjar from Valhalla would meet their destined end. So Helheim's true power lay in its potential. It was a reservoir of silent, waiting souls, a population of the deceased who would one day be mobilized for the world's destruction. This transforms the Norse underworld from a simple afterlife into a key piece in an apocalyptic countdown. The goddess Hel, ruling her quiet, cold hall, was not just a caretaker of the dead, but a keeper of an army, a passive queen awaiting the trumpet call that would turn her entire realm into an instrument of fate. It presents a haunting idea that the common dead, those who lived and died in obscurity, are still part of the grand, tragic story of everything, their final role merely postponed until the end of all things. If the Norse dead waited in cold silence for an apocalypse, the underworld of the Maya was a place of active, cunning terror. Xibalba, the place of fright, was less a realm and more a sentient trap, a living maze designed to break the spirit through psychological torment and impossible tests. Its rulers were not grim sovereigns but cruel tricksters, the lords of death, who delighted in humiliation and despair. To reach their dark court, a soul had to navigate a descent of almost cartoonish horror, passing rivers of putrid blood and pus, crossing roads guarded by swarming scorpions and shrieking bats, and finally facing a crossroads of four-colored paths, each one a deadly illusion. Only the black road, the color of obsidian and sacrifice, led to the true heart of the darkness. This journey was a gauntlet of revulsion, meant to overwhelm the senses and crush hope before the trials even began. At the center of it all sat the lords themselves, figures with names like Scab Stripper and Blood Gatherer, who presided over a series of deadly houses. There was the Dark House, a chamber of utter blackness, the Cold House filled with biting hail, the Jaguar House, and the Razor House, where animated blades flew through the air. Each was a death trap designed for a specific, gruesome end. The genius of Xibalba, however, was not in its physical dangers but in its mastery of deceit. The lords would invite visitors to sit on a heated stone bench that was actually a searing griddle, or offer them a fragrant cigar and a floral bouquet that were actually instruments of instant death. To fail was to die, but to win the game was to face an even crueler fate. For the victors were often sacrificed and their bodies hung in a ghoulish trophy tree as a warning. This was the fate that befell the fathers of the legendary hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque. Their story is the heart of the Popol Vuh, and it reveals the only way to conquer such a place. The twins, born with destiny in their blood, did not avoid Xibalba. They descended into it willingly to avenge their father and uncle. Knowing the Lord's love for deception, they turned their own weapons against them. When challenged to the sacred ball game, a contest that represented the very movement of the cosmos, the twins deliberately lost the first match, allowing themselves to be sacrificed. But this was part of a deeper plan. Through magical resurrection and shapeshifting, they returned to the court of the Death Lords not as challengers, but as wondrous performers, dancing and performing miracles. They sacrificed a dog and brought it back to life, then set a house ablaze and walked out unharmed. Captivated and greedy for more spectacle, the lords demanded the ultimate trick, that the twins sacrifice a person and bring them back. Hunahpu and Xbalanque obliged, but their volunteer was a lord of Xibalba. With a single slash they ended him, and this time they left him dead. The trap was sprung. The remaining lords, terrified and begging for the same resurrection, were then easily dispatched. The twins did not destroy Xibalba itself, for it was a necessary part of the world's order. Instead, they broke its power over the living and the heroic. They diminished the lords, forbidding them from ever again demanding the ball game from humans, and in a final act of poetic justice, they transformed the lords into the lowly stones that are now ground for corn. The legend of Xibalba teaches us that the most terrifying underworld is not one of simple punishment, but of intelligent malice. To overcome it requires more than strength or virtue. It demands a superior cunning, the willingness to enter the game, play by its twisted rules, and then rewrite them from within. The hero twins won not by avoiding the traps, but by walking into the heart of the deception and turning the Lord's own love of cruelty into their doom. The chilling, deceptive games of Xibalba give way to a mist of a different kind. Across the sea, in the green hills and wild shores of the Celtic world, the underworld was not a place of punishment or terror, but a shimmering, elusive paradise known as Annwn. This was not a subterranean cavern, but a parallel realm, an island of the blessed often hidden by sea, mist, or access through the sides of ancient burial mounds. Its name itself means the deep or the unworld, suggesting a place that is profoundly other yet intimately close. Annwn defied simple categorization. It was at once a possible afterlife for heroes and a timeless land of the supernatural, the dwelling place of the gods and fairy folk, a realm of perpetual feasting, music, and youth. Its ruler could be the solemn Charon, king of the dead, or the maritime magician Manon MacLure, who rode the waves in a chariot and owned a cloak of mists that could make whole islands vanish. This duality is the core of its mystery. One of the most famous journeys to Annwn comes from the Welsh epic, the Mabinogion. In the first branch, the noble P. Will makes a grave error by allowing his hounds to chase off the spectral hounds of Charon during a hunt. To atone, he must trade places with the Otherworld king for a year and a day, taking Charon's form to defeat his rival Hafgun. P. Will succeeds, but the true test is one of restraint. Sharing a bed with Charon's beautiful queen, he does not touch her, an act of profound honor that cements a lifelong friendship between the two kings. This story frames Annwn not as a prize to be won, but as a realm with its own codes of conduct where alliances between worlds are possible. Yet Annwn was also a destination for quests, most famously for the magical cauldron of inspiration and rebirth. In the poem The Spoils of Annwn, King Arthur and his men sailed their ship Prydwen into the misty fortresses of the Otherworld to seize this treasure. They face revolving fortresses, a glass prison, and the relentless watch of otherworldly guardians. The cauldron itself, tended by 9 maidens, would not boil the food of a coward, a test of pure character. The voyage is catastrophic, with only 7 men returning, a stark reminder that the paradise of Annwn was fiercely protected and could be perilous to those who approached with greed. This is the captivating contradiction of the Celtic underworld. It was a land of apple trees in perpetual blossom, of pigs that were slaughtered each night only to be reborn whole each morning for another feast, a symbol of endless abundance. But it was accessed through liminal spaces, the sudden fog on a lake, the entrance to a Shia mound at twilight, a door that appeared only when the veil between worlds was thin. Annwn asked a subtle question of the living. Was this a realm you reached only in death, or could you, through courage, honor, or sheer chance, step into its timeless joy while still alive, and would you ever be able or even want to return? But a paradise that demands honor like Annwn is a gentle master compared to a courtroom of cosmic law. For the ancient traditions of India, the underworld was neither a final destination nor a gloomy waiting room, but a meticulously managed correctional facility for the soul. This is Naraka, a vast and complex system of purgatorial hells where punishment is not eternal, but a precise and temporary sentence. Here, the governing principle is karma, the universal law of cause and effect that operates with the cold precision of a natural force. Every action, word, and thought in life generates a kind of spiritual residue, and Naraka exists to burn that residue away. It is not a place of divine wrath, but of inevitable consequence, a cosmic detox center where the soul is purified through suffering tailored to its specific debts. The judge and warden of this immense domain is Yama, the first mortal to die and thus the king of the dead. He is often depicted with green or red skin, riding a buffalo and carrying a noose to capture departing souls. In his court, the scribe Chitragupta reads aloud from a vast ledger, the Agrasandhani, which records every single deed of a lifetime. There is no pleading or deception here, the account is absolute. Based on this karmic audit, Yama dispenses justice, sentencing the soul to a specific Naraka whose torments perfectly mirror the crimes committed. The variety is staggering, reflecting a profound understanding of moral cause and effect. There is the Raurava Naraka, the hell of screams for those who tortured others. The Mahararava, the hell of great screams for those who destroyed public property or killed animals for sport. The Tamasra, or Hell of Darkness, is for thieves and robbers. The Antatamasra, Blinding Darkness, is reserved for those who abandoned their spouses. In these realms, the punishment is a direct, exaggerated reflection of the harm caused. A liar might have molten lead poured down their throat. A person who withheld water from the thirsty might wander a desert, perpetually seeing mirages of cool lakes. The key philosophical difference from Western hells is the temporary nature of this torment. A sentence in Naraca could last for thousands of years, but it has a definite end. Once the specific karmic debt is paid, the soul, now cleansed of that particular impurity, is reborn back into the cycle of life, or samsara, to continue its long journey toward liberation. This transforms suffering from a pointless eternity into a painful but necessary lesson. Naraca is not about damnation, it is about balance. It presents a universe of meticulous, inescapable justice where every action echoes, and where the underworld itself functions as a brutal but fair school for the soul, ensuring that no debt, good or bad, goes unsettled in the grand ledger of existence. The meticulous justice of Naraca offers a path to rebirth, but some underworlds promised only a final, quiet erasure. For the Aztec people, the fate of most souls was not a paradise or a punishment, but an arduous journey into absolute stillness. This was Mictlan, the place of the dead, a 9-layered realm deep within the earth, ruled by the skeletal lord and lady Mictlantecutli and Mictlantecuhtli. Unlike the glorious afterlife for warriors who died in battle or women who died in childbirth, Mictlan was the destination for those who perished from ordinary causes, which meant it awaited the overwhelming majority of humanity. The journey there was not instantaneous but a grueling pilgrimage said to last 4 years, a reflection of the Aztec belief that death itself was a process, not an event. The soul's path was a descent through a series of terrifying and surreal obstacles. First, the departed had to cross a wide river, aided only by a small yellow dog. The Aztecs often buried or cremated a person with a dog figurine for this very purpose, as the animal's spirit would recognize its master and carry them across the dark waters. Next came the place where 2 great mountains clashed together continuously, forcing the soul to slip through at the precise moment they drew apart. Then came the hill of obsidian knives, a slope of razor-sharp volcanic glass, followed by the frozen desert where cutting winds blew without cease. Each level presented a trial that stripped away the soul's attachments and identity. There was the place of flags, where banners flapped in an impossible wind, and the region where the soul was pierced by arrows shot from unseen hands. The soul would pass through the realm of wild beasts that fed on hearts and finally cross the 9 rivers of the underworld before reaching the deepest chamber. Here, in the 9th and final layer, the soul stood before the sovereigns of decay, Mictlantecutli and Mictlantecuhtli. There was no judgment, no weighing of deeds. The journey itself had been the purification. Having survived the 4-year ordeal, the soul simply presented its offerings to the death gods and then, in their presence, faded into nothingness. This was the ultimate destination, not torment but oblivion, a complete dissolution of the self into the silent, dark heart of the earth. The profound austerity of this legend speaks to a worldview that saw life as a fleeting, vibrant struggle against an inevitable and total end. Mictlan was not a reward or a sentence, it was the final, quiet surrender to the fundamental laws of nature, where every ordinary soul, after one last great effort, would find rest in absolute, dreamless non-existence. Yet the silent dissolution of Mictlan is not the only fate born from a single, irreversible glance. Across the Pacific, in the sacred chronicles of Japan, we find an underworld born from a similar moment of failed restraint, a realm that would define an entire culture's relationship with death and impurity. This is Yomi, the land of gloom, and its story is inextricably tied to the divine couple who created the Japanese islands themselves, Izanagi and Izanami. Their tale, recorded in the ancient Kojiki, begins not in darkness but in creation. Standing on the floating bridge of heaven, they stirred the primordial brine with a jeweled spear, and the drops that fell from its tip formed the first land. They descended, married, and gave birth to the islands of Japan and to many gods, but tragedy struck when Izanami gave birth to the fire god Kagetsuchi. The birth burned her terribly, and she died, descending to the land of Yomi. Izanagi, mad with grief, followed after her, determined to bring his beloved back to the land of the living. After a long journey through deepening shadows, he found her at last in her darkened hall. In the gloom, he could not see her clearly. Izanagi pleaded with her to return, but Izanami's voice echoed from the darkness with a sorrowful finality. She told him he had come too late, for she had already eaten the food of Yomi, binding her soul to that place. Yet, moved by his devotion, she said she would plead with the gods of Yomi for her release. She made him swear one solemn promise: he must not look upon her while she deliberated. But Izanagi, consumed by love and impatience, could not wait. Breaking off a tooth from the comb in his hair, he lit it as a torch and peered into the hall. The flickering light revealed not his beautiful wife, but a horrifying spectacle of decay. Izanami's once radiant body was now a rotting corpse, swollen and putrid, with maggots squirming and thunder gods roaring in her organs. This vision was the ultimate transgression. By looking upon the pollution of death, Izanagi had committed a profound taboo. Enraged and humiliated, Izanami shrieked and sent the hideous hags of Yomi, along with an army of thunder gods, to pursue him for his betrayal. What follows is a frantic, magical escape. Izanagi fled, blocking the pass to Yomi with a massive boulder. From opposite sides of this eternal barrier, the two creators who had made the world together uttered their final words. Izanami declared she would strangle 1,000 of the living each day. Izanagi countered that he would cause 1,500 to be born. This established the eternal balance between life and death. But the consequences of that single glance were permanent. Yomi was sealed not just as a place, but as a state of profound kegare, or ritual impurity. Unlike other underworlds, Yomi is not a place of moral judgment or reward. It is simply the land of decay, a realm of permanent pollution that stands in absolute opposition to the purity and vitality of the living world, or Takamagahara. The legend cemented a core principle of Shinto belief, that contact with death creates a spiritual contamination that must be ritually cleansed. This is why purification rituals, from the washing of hands at a shrine gate to the elaborate ceremonies performed by priests, are so central to the practice. Death itself was not evil, but it was a powerful source of kegare that disrupted the harmonious flow of life. Izanagi himself performed the first such purification upon his return, washing himself in a river and giving birth to the sun goddess Amaterasu from his left eye as he cleansed his face. So Yomi's legacy is not one of fear of punishment, but of a deep cultural emphasis on separation and purification. It taught that the world of the living and the world of the dead must remain distinctly apart, and that the sacred act of life requires constant vigilance against the creeping shadow of decay. The boulder that sealed the pass still stands in myth, a permanent reminder that some thresholds once crossed can never be uncrossed, and that some sights once seen forever change the boundary between the pure and the polluted. The deep silence of Yomi, a realm sealed by a single boulder, finds its echo in the watery, whispering depths of another underworld, one that flowed through the forests and rivers of ancient Slavic lands. This was Nav, a chthonic realm not of fire or ice, but of primordial moisture, the dark soil, and the roots of the world tree. Unlike the stark divisions of other mythologies, Nav existed in a complex, almost symbiotic tension with the world above, a relationship embodied by its enigmatic ruler, the god Veles. He was the god of cattle, wealth, magic, and the underworld, a being of earth and water who stood in eternal opposition to Charon, the thunder god of the sky, law, and warfare. Their legendary conflict was the central drama of Slavic cosmology. Charon, armed with lightning bolts and ruling from the heights of the world tree's branches, represented order, the clear sky, and the power of the tribe. Veles, often depicted as a serpent or a bearded man with the horns of an ox, lurked below. He was the god of the wild, untamed places, of the fertile mud of riverbanks, of poetic inspiration, and of cunning. He would often steal Charon's cattle, his lightning, or even his wife, drawing the thunderer down from the heavens in a furious chase that ended with Veles being struck by lightning and fleeing into the waters or beneath a great stone, a mythic cycle that explained the changing seasons and storms. This was not a simple battle of good versus evil, but a necessary cosmic balance between the structured world of the community and the chaotic, creative, and ultimately fertile power of the earth itself. Nav, as Veles's domain, reflected this duality. It was the land of the dead, yes, but also a source of mystical knowledge and natural abundance. Souls were believed to travel there after death, not for judgment, but for a continued existence that mirrored the cycles of nature. Folk tales described two possible paths. One led across the starry bridge of the Milky Way, known as the Bird's Way or the Path of the Souls, a celestial river guiding the departed to their rest. The other, more intimate belief held that the soul did not travel far at all. Instead, it might take residence in a specific tree, a family totem like the birch or oak watching over its descendants. Or it could descend into a local body of water, a deep forest spring or a quiet bend in the river, merging with the very essence of Nav's damp vitality. In this view, the underworld was not a distant, sealed kingdom, but an immanent presence in the landscape. A grove of ancient trees might be a sacred grove, a village of ancestors. A mist rising from a pond at dawn could be the breath of the departed. This created a profound connection between the living and the dead, where the boundary between Nav and the human world was porous, maintained through rituals, offerings, and a deep respect for the natural world that Veles governed. To understand Nav is to understand a worldview where death was not an end, nor a pollution, but a transformation into another form of the Earth's endless, damp, and mysterious life. The soul became part of the cattle in the field, the magic in the storyteller's words, the wealth in the deep soil, forever under the watchful, horned gaze of the god who ruled the fertile dark. Yet the fertile darkness of Nav offers a stark contrast to the most ancient and desolate underworld of all, one whose very name became a synonym for hopeless oblivion. Long before the Greeks imagined Hades or the Egyptians built the Duat, the people of Mesopotamia gazed into the abyss and saw a city of dust. This was Urkala, the great below, the Sumerian and later Akkadian realm of the dead. A place so profoundly bleak it makes other underworlds seem almost hospitable. Urkala was not a land of punishment or moral reckoning, but of utter, unrelenting deprivation. It was envisioned as a massive, fortified city buried deep beneath the earth, its foundations resting on the primordial ocean of chaos. Its walls were described as towering and impregnable, its gates bolted shut with locks that could never be opened from within. Inside, there was no light, no air, only an eternal, choking gloom. The inhabitants were not souls, but etimu, shades or ghosts stripped of all vitality and memory. They existed in a state of passive, silent misery, clad in feathers like birds, a symbol of their rootless, weightless existence. Their sustenance was as bleak as their surroundings. They consumed only clay and drank from puddles of stagnant dust. This was the ultimate fate of every human being, king and commoner alike, for in Urkala there was no distinction of rank or merit. All were reduced to the same shadowy, insubstantial forms, a democracy of despair ruled by the formidable and terrifying goddess Ereshkigal. She was the absolute sovereign of this silent kingdom, the older sister of the vibrant goddess Ishtar. While Ishtar ruled love, war, and the fertile world above, Ereshkigal commanded the sterile stillness below. Her power was absolute and her nature was fierce, a reflection of the unforgiving realm she governed. The most famous story of Ercala is not a hero's quest, but a tale of divine hubris and the absolute law of this underworld, the epic of Ishtar's descent. Driven by pride or perhaps a desire to challenge her sister's dominion, Ishtar, the goddess of heaven, decided to descend into the great city. She approached the first of its 7 gates and demanded entry. The gatekeeper, following Ereshkigal's unbreakable decree, stopped her. To enter the land of the dead, he explained, you must pay the price of life. At the first gate, he took a great crown. At the second, her earrings. Gate by gate, he stripped her of every symbol of her divine power and identity, her necklace, her jeweled breastplate, the garments of her body, until she stood utterly naked and powerless before her sister's throne. Ereshkigal did not welcome her. She fixed Ishtar with the gaze of death, and the Queen of Heaven fell lifeless, her corpse hung on a hook. The world above, deprived of love and fertility, began to wither and die. Only through desperate negotiation did the other gods secure her release, forcing Ereshkigal to revive Ishtar with the water of life. But the law of Ercala demanded a substitute. As Ishtar was led back out, reclaiming her attributes at each gate, a troop of demons followed her, tasked with taking anyone back to fill her empty place. The story ends with the tragic selection of her husband, Dumuzi, who must spend half the year in the dusty dark, explaining the barren summer months. This myth captures the essence of Ercala. It is not a place you conquer or escape. It is a one-way street of diminishment. Its central lesson is one of terrifying equality. In the great below, all the glories of life, your status, your strength, your very identity, are systematically taken from you. You become a shade among shades, eating dust for eternity. There is no promise of rebirth, no field of reeds, no glorious hall for heroes. Ercala is the oldest, purest expression of the fear that death is not a transition, but an eternal, silent subtraction. It asks a haunting question that echoes across millennia. What remains of a person when every single thing that made them who they are has been stripped away at the gate, leaving only a whisper in the dust? That dusty, silent subtraction of Ercala finds its polar opposite in a realm of feverish, meticulous activity. From the silent city of dust, we travel to a place of overwhelming noise and relentless procedure, the sprawling, multi-leveled bureaucracy of the Chinese underworld, DU. This is not a single hell, but a vast, subterranean prison complex, a celestial department of justice with a frighteningly efficient workflow. The soul's journey here begins not with a ferryman, but with paperwork. Upon death, the soul is escorted by ghostly guards to the first of many tribunals, where it stands before the primary judge, King Yama. Borrowed and adapted from Buddhist tradition, Yama in this context presides over a system of 10 courts, each with its own king and its own specialized docket of sins. This is a legalistic nightmare of perfect accountability. The soul's life is reviewed in the mirror of reflection, which shows every action, good and bad, with undeniable clarity. There are no arguments, only evidence. Based on this audit, a sentence is passed and the soul is sent down, level by level, into the depths of DU. The geography of this underworld is a masterpiece of moral cause and effect. There are 18 major levels, and some traditions speak of thousands of sub-levels, each one a factory of punishment designed for a specific transgression. There is the mountain of knives for those who committed murder, the forest of bronze pillars for adulterers, the cauldron of boiling oil for corrupt officials and thieves. The punishment is always a grotesque, literal reflection of the crime. A liar might have their tongue pulled out endlessly. A gossip might have their heart ripped from their chest. A person who wasted food might be force-fed molten iron. But DU is more than a chamber of horrors. It is a journey of forced remembrance and cleansing. Before facing their specific punishment, the soul must cross the Naihi Bridge, the bridge of helplessness. This precarious span arches over a river of blood guarded by a ferocious demon. Only virtuous souls can cross safely. Those with heavy sins lose their balance and tumble into the bloody waters below, to be seized by waiting monsters and dragged to their judgment. Later, after the soul's sentence in the hells is served, there comes one last poignant station, the Wangxiangtai, the Terrace of Oblivion. From this high platform, the soul is granted a final view of their former life, their family, their home. It is a moment of profound sorrow and release. Then they are given a broth of oblivion, the Mengpo soup, which erases all memories of that past life. This act is not cruelty, but mercy, a necessary wipe of the slate. Only a soul cleansed of both sin and memory is fit to be sent back to the wheel of reincarnation. This is the ultimate purpose of Diyu's brutal bureaucracy. It is not a place of eternal damnation, but of temporary, agonizing rehabilitation. Every session in the boiling cauldron, every climb up the mountain of blades, serves to burn away a specific karmic debt. Once the ledger is balanced, the soul, now blank and pure, is reborn into the world of the living for another chance. The terrifying genius of Diyu is its sheer administrative thoroughness. It presents a universe where no misdeed is too small to be logged, and no punishment is arbitrary. It is a cosmic civil service operating with chilling, impersonal efficiency, ensuring that every soul, through pain and forgetfulness, eventually earns the right to try again. The impersonal courts of Diyu could not be further from the next underworld, a realm woven from the very fabric of the northern forest. In Finnish mythology, the land of the dead is not a pit or a city, but a distant island shrouded in perpetual mist called Tuonla. This was a silent, shadowy reflection of the world above, a place where the dead continued their lives in a quieter, grayer key, forever separated from the living by a wide and terrible river, the black, rushing waters of Tuonla's stream. Reaching it was not a passive journey of the soul, but an active, perilous quest that only the most powerful shamans or taitiya dared to undertake. It required a voyage not just across physical distance, but across a spiritual boundary, often undertaken to seek wisdom from the ancestors or to recover something lost. The journey was fraught with deadly obstacles. The river itself was a maelstrom of sharp rocks and grinding rapids, its currents strong enough to shatter any ordinary boat. And in its waters lurked a monstrous guardian, a great black serpent or a terrifying water beast, waiting to devour the unprepared. To cross, the traveler needed the services of a specific grim ferryman. This was not a skeletal Charon, but a figure named Chuonan Titi, the Maiden of Chuoni, or sometimes simply a silent, sullen old man. He would not take coin. His price was something far more personal, a story, a song, or a demonstration of the traveler's magical power. Only by proving one's worth and respect for the realm of the dead could one secure passage in his rickety, leaky boat. The most famous of all these shamanic journeys belongs to the great hero and eternal sage Väinämöinen. In the epic poetry of the Kalevala, he does not travel to Tuonla to rescue a lover, but to obtain 3 words of profound magical knowledge needed to complete a mighty spell. His voyage is a masterclass in cunning and resilience. He walks for weeks through a bleak, pathless forest, finally arriving at the river's edge. There, he cleverly avoids the water beast and, through his commanding presence and wisdom, convinces the reluctant ferryman to carry him across the perilous black water. Upon reaching the misty shores of the island, he is not welcomed. The inhabitants of Tuonla, recognizing a living soul, immediately plot to trap him there forever. They offer him a beer brewed with adders and frogs, a drink of oblivion, and prepare a great sealed net to capture him should he try to leave, but Väinämöinen's magic is supreme. He transforms himself into a serpent to slip through their nets, and escaping in his boat, he chants a powerful spell of iron and steel to seal the gates of Tuonla behind him, vowing that none shall easily leave that land again. His quest was a success, but it came at the cost of reinforcing the absolute separation between the worlds. Tuonla, in this legend, is not a place of punishment, but a vast reservoir of ancestral memory and potent, dangerous wisdom. It is deeply connected to the cycles of nature, a necessary counterpart to the world of the living, ruled by the shadowy god Tuoni and his goddess wife Tuonta. To enter it was to tap into the root knowledge of the earth itself, but to do so required immense skill, respect, and the acceptance that one might become a permanent part of the silence one sought to question. But the silent, misty island of Tuonla, a place of guarded ancestral wisdom, presents a stark contrast to a world view where the land itself is alive with memory and creation. In the vast, sun-baked heart of Australia, Aboriginal cultures hold a vision of existence that dissolves the very idea of a separate underworld. Here, the sacred realm is not below, but woven into the fabric of the world you walk upon, and the afterlife is a return to its eternal source. This is the dream time or the dreaming, a concept far deeper than simple myth. It is the all-at-once time of creation when ancestral beings rose from a formless earth and began their epic journeys. They sang the world into existence. With every step they shaped mountains, carved riverbeds, and scattered the stars. When their work was done, they did not depart for a distant heaven. They sank back into the land, transforming into the very features they created: a rocky outcrop, a waterhole, a stand of trees. The dream time is not a past event, but a continuous, parallel reality, a layer of profound meaning that exists right now, pulsing within the landscape. For the living, the goal is to maintain this sacred order through ritual, story, and song, practices known as keeping the law. This connection to country is everything, a spiritual identity tied to specific sites and tracks left by the ancestors. So what happens at death? The journey varies among the many distinct nations, but a common thread is this profound integration. Often, the spirit of the deceased is believed to return to its own country, the specific tract of land for which it holds custodial responsibility. It might linger near a sacred waterhole or merge with a particular rock formation that holds the essence of its ancestral being. In this way, the person becomes part of the living memory of the place, watching over their descendants and the land itself. But for some, the journey arcs upward. Certain traditions speak of a sky world, a celestial realm accessible via a cosmic tree or a pathway of stars, like the Emu in the Milky Way. This is not an escape from the earth, but its luminous counterpart. The spirit may travel there to be with the great ancestral figures, like the rainbow serpent or the sky heroes, existing in a state of peace and creative power. Yet even this celestial abode is intimately connected to the earth below, influencing the seasons and the fertility of the land. The profound beauty of this system is its lack of finality. There is no stark judgment, no eternal fire, no silent dust. The afterlife is a homecoming to a network of relationships that never truly ended. The ancestor who became a mountain millennia ago and the elder who passed last week both reside within the same timeless continuum of the dreaming. The land is a living scripture, and every person is a syllable within its ongoing song. This legend challenges our very architecture of the sacred underworld by asking, what if the realm of the dead isn't a destination at all, but simply a deeper layer of the world we already inhabit? A layer where every hill and river holds the breath of creation and the quiet presence of those who walked it before. This integration of the dead into the living land stands in stark opposition to a vision where the afterlife is a place of absolute, irreversible exile. The Christian hell is perhaps the most culturally pervasive underworld of all, a realm that evolved dramatically from its ancient roots into a theater of eternal torment. Its story begins not with fire but with silence in the Hebrew concept of Sheol. This was a shadowy, neutral pit beneath the earth where all the dead, good and evil alike, went to a ghostly, diminished existence. It was a place of stillness, not punishment, more akin to the dusty Urkala than to any later inferno. The transformation began with theological shifts emphasizing divine justice and the resurrection of the dead. The idea emerged that the righteous would be raised to life while the wicked would face judgment. By the time of the New Testament, Gehenna, a term referencing a perpetually burning garbage dump outside Jerusalem, became the metaphor for this fate, a place of unquenchable fire and undying worms, a symbol of total destruction. Over centuries of doctrine and artistic imagination, this metaphor crystallized into the hell we recognize today, a domain of active, endless punishment ruled by Satan, the fallen angel. Its most enduring and vivid map was drawn not by a theologian but by a poet. Dante Alighieri's Inferno gave the abstract doctrine a terrifying geography. In his epic journey, hell is a vast funnel-shaped pit descending through 9 concentric circles, each one reserved for a specific category of sin, with punishments that poetically mirror the crimes. The lustful are forever buffeted by a whirlwind, symbolizing their lack of self-control. The gluttonous lie in a vile slush of eternal rain and hail. The violent swim in a river of boiling blood, while the fraudulent and treacherous are immersed in a frozen lake at the very bottom. And here, at the nadir of creation, Dante presents his most shocking inversion. Satan is not surrounded by flames, but imprisoned up to his chest in a frozen lake, the ice formed by the beating of his own giant wings as he tries to escape. He is a grotesque, 3-faced giant, eternally chewing on history's ultimate traitors, Judas, Brutus, and Cassius, in his 3 mouths. This image of Satan, not as a triumphant ruler of hell, but as its first and greatest prisoner, encapsulates a key theological point. Hell is not Satan's kingdom by right, but his prison by God's design. Its primary purpose is not for him to rule, but for unrepented sin to be quarantined and justice to be eternally served. This stands in direct contrast to the other destinations in Dante's cosmology, purgatory and paradise. Purgatory is a mountain of hopeful suffering where souls are purified through temporary, willing penance, their eyes fixed on eventual ascent to heaven. Paradise is the realm of perfect unity with God, of light, music, and absolute love. Hell is the absence of that love, a self-chosen exile defined by its utter separation from the divine source of all warmth, light, and connection. Its fire is less about physical pain, though that is vividly described, and more about the anguish of final, permanent rejection. The legend of the Christian hell, therefore, presents the underworld as the ultimate consequence of a choice, a state of being where the soul gets forever what it ultimately desired, an existence apart from God. It is the most judicial and moralistic of all underworlds, an eternal sentence passed not by a committee of assessors or a karmic ledger, but by the soul's own refusal of grace, leaving it frozen in its own defiant, isolated pride at the center of all things. Where hell is a prison of eternal ice, the next underworld burns with the fire of absolute moral choice. In the ancient Persian faith of Zoroastrianism, the cosmos itself is a battlefield between 2 fundamental forces, Ashar, which is truth, order, and light, and Drudge, the lie, which is chaos, deceit, and darkness. Every human thought, word, and deed is a vote for one side or the other, and the afterlife is the ultimate tally. For those who sided with the lie, the destination is Duzak, a grim pit of punishment that is less a realm of demons and more a state of self-inflicted anguish. The journey there begins not at a river, but at a moment of profound stillness. For 3 days after death, the soul is said to linger near the head of its former body, contemplating the life it has just lived. On the 4th morning, it begins its fateful trek to the place of judgment. The path is not easy, for the soul must face its own conscience personified, a beautiful maiden if its life was good, or a terrifying, rotting hag if its life was wicked. This figure is the Dina, the embodiment of the soul's own inner faith and actions. She is not a judge sent from above, but a reflection cast from within, a walking mirror of one's spiritual choices. The sight of her confirms what the soul already knows. Then comes the central, terrifying drama, the crossing of the Chinvat Bridge. This is the bridge of the separator, the final divide between the realms of light and darkness. For the righteous soul, the one who lived in accordance with Asher, the bridge is a wide, welcoming path. It leads straight to the house of song, the glorious paradise of endless light and music presided over by the wise Lord Ahura Mazda. But for the follower of Drudge, the bridge transforms. It narrows until it becomes the sharp edge of a blade. Below this razor's edge yawns the abyss of Duzak. As the wicked soul attempts to cross, it loses its balance, tumbling down into the darkness. The torments of Duzak are vividly described, a place of filth, stench, and terrible cold. But its most famous punishment is a poetic reflection of the lie itself. The condemned are fed a banquet of poison and venom, a feast of their own spiritual corruption. Yet even here, Zoroastrianism offers a startling note of hope that most underworlds do not. Duzak is not necessarily eternal. At the end of time, after a great cosmic renovation, a final purification is believed to cleanse even the souls in Duzak. They will be bathed in a river of molten metal that feels like warm milk to the righteous but burns the wicked clean, ultimately allowing all to be united in perfection. This vision makes the Chinvat Bridge not a final sentence, but the ultimate test of personal responsibility. It asks a question that cuts to the core of human existence when you stand before the mirror of your own life. What face will be looking back at you, and will the path you built for your soul be wide enough to walk or sharp enough to cut you down? The razor's edge of the Chinvat Bridge demanded a life of conscious choice. But for the Inca, the cosmos was a living body where every part was eternally connected. Their universe was not a hierarchy of heaven and hell, but a sacred trilogy of interlocking realms, a system of profound balance known as the Three Pacha. High above was Honan Pacha, the upper world of the sun, moon, stars, and celestial gods like Intai, the sun god. This was the realm of order, light, and the future. Then there was K Pacha, the middle world, the here and now where humans, animals, and plants lived. This was the tangible world of the present, a plane of constant interaction and struggle. And finally, beneath it all, cradling the roots of the mountains and the sources of the rivers, was Uku Pacha, the inner world. This was the Inca underworld, but to call it simply a land of the dead would be to misunderstand it completely. Uku Pacha was not a place of darkness or punishment. It was a fertile, generative interior, the womb of the earth itself. Imagine the Andes not as a chain of mountains, but as a living being. Honan Pacha was the head, gazing at the stars. K Pacha was the beating heart and the working body. And Uku Pacha was the vast, dark, nurturing belly, where life was digested and prepared to be born anew. This inner world was intimately associated with the dead, yes, but also with all that was hidden, potential, and moist. It was the source of every spring that bubbled from the ground, the home of every tuber growing unseen in the soil, the reservoir of all agricultural fertility. When an Inca died, the physical body was often mummified and placed in a fetal position, then buried in a cave or a stone tomb called a cholpa. This was not an act of hiding the dead, but of returning them to Uku Pacha, where their essence could nourish the cycle of life from within. The ruler of this deep, fertile realm was Supe. In later colonial times, Supe was transformed into a devil-like figure by Christian missionaries, but in the original Inca cosmology, he was a far more complex and necessary god. He was the lord of the inner earth, a powerful and potentially dangerous entity who governed the untamed forces of the underground, but he was not evil. He was a custodian. Offerings were made to Supe to ensure the fertility of the fields and the flow of water from the springs he controlled. The connection between Uku Pacha and K Pacha was not a one-way street sealed by death. It was a constant, vital exchange. This communication happened through specific portals, the Pacarinas. These were caves, springs, or even unusual rock formations, places where the inner world broke through to the surface. A cave mouth was not just a hole in a hill, it was the Earth's navel, a direct passage to the generative depths. The first Inca ancestors were believed to have emerged from such sacred caves at Pacaratambo, literally the Inn of Dawn, linking the origin of their people directly to Uku Pacha. Water flowing from a spring was not just water, it was the literal sweat or milk of the earth, a gift from the inner world to sustain the middle one. This created a breathtakingly integrated view of existence. A farmer planting potatoes in K Pacha was placing seeds into the skin of Uku Pacha. The rain falling from Honan Pacha soaked into the ground, feeding the reservoirs of the inner world, which would then release that water through springs to feed the crops. The dead residing within the earth became part of this nourishing cycle. The entire system relied on reciprocity, or Aini. Just as the living received water and food from Uku Pacha, they had to give back. This meant regular offerings of chicha corn beer, coca leaves, or even carefully orchestrated sacrifices were poured into the earth or left at cave entrances, a direct transaction with the interior realm to maintain the balance. So Uku Pacha challenges our very notion of an underworld as a separate, shadowy afterlife. It was instead the foundational, creative substrate of all life, a dark, moist, and profoundly fertile interior where death was not an end, but a return to the source, ensuring that the world above could continue to live and grow. Yet the fertile interior of Uku Pacha, a world of constant exchange, presents a different challenge for a people defined by endless voyages across open water. For the Polynesians, the greatest mystery was not what lay beneath the soil, but what waited beyond the horizon. Their underworld was not a descent into darkness, but a journey across the sea, a return to the source of all life. This sacred destination had two profound names, Pulatu and Haweki, concepts that wove together the afterlife, ancestral memory, and the very identity of a people. Pulatu, particularly in the traditions of Tonga and Samoa, was envisioned as a paradisiacal island lying far to the west, the direction of the setting sun. It was not a gloomy realm of the dead, but a magnificent ancestral homeland of eternal abundance. Stories describe it as a place of incredible beauty, where fragrant gardens bloomed without cultivation, where food was plentiful and required no labor, and where the ancestors lived in a state of perfect peace and joy. The great god of this realm was often Hikulau, a deity associated with fertility and the underworld who presided over this blessed land. To reach Pulatu, the soul of the deceased had to undertake a final, symbolic voyage. It would travel to the westernmost point of the known islands, often a specific headland or cliff, and from there leap or be carried by spirit canoes across the vast ocean to that distant, shimmering shore. This journey mirrored the greatest feat of the living, the epic sea migrations that had populated the Pacific, framing death as the ultimate navigation. This idea of a homeland across the sea is inseparable from the even more foundational concept of Haweki. This name is not just a place, it is the wellspring of existence. Haweki is the mythical, ancestral homeland from which all Polynesian peoples originated. It is the place where the world was formed, where the great ancestors like Moi fished up islands from the deep, and where the first great voyaging canoes were built and launched. For the Maori of New Zealand, Haweki is the distant island their ancestors left behind in the Great Migration, but Haweki is also the final destination. After death, the spirit, or Wariua, would begin its journey north and west, retracing the migratory path of its forebears in reverse. It would travel up the coast, perhaps pause at spiritual waypoints, and finally depart from the northern tip of the land, Cape Ringa. Here, at the roots of an ancient, wind-swept pohutukawa tree, the spirit would slide down into the ocean and begin its long swim back to Haweki. This was not a physical return to a geographical island, but a spiritual return to the origin point of the soul's own lineage. The profound importance of this concept cannot be overstated. In a world defined by ocean voyages, your identity was your genealogy, your wakapapa, a line that stretched back across the waves to Haweki. To die without the knowledge or spiritual strength to make this return journey was a terrible fate, potentially leaving the soul lost and adrift forever. This is why chants, rituals, and precise genealogical knowledge were so vital. They were the spiritual charts for this final voyage. The living had a sacred duty to guide the departing spirit with correct funeral rites and karakia, or prayers, to ensure it could find its way. This creates a breathtaking circularity of existence. Life itself was a journey outward from Hawaii, an exploration and settlement of new lands. Death was the journey home, a reintegration with the ancestral source. The ocean, which was both the highway of life and the barrier between worlds, became the path of the soul. So the Polynesian underworld asks a question of profound belonging. When your entire culture is built on voyages of discovery, where do you truly belong when the journey ends? The answer lies not in a dark pit below, but in the memory of a sacred shore from which all voyages begin, and to which every traveler in the end must navigate their way back. A journey back to an ancestral homeland across the waves offers a clear destination. But what if the afterlife was not a place at all, but a state of radical disorientation? In the high Himalayas, Tibetan Buddhism presents one of the most intricate and psychologically profound maps of the post-death journey, a realm of pure potential and terrifying choice known as the Bardo. This is not a permanent underworld, but a transitional in-between state, a limbo that begins at the moment of clinical death and can last for up to 49 days. Think of it as a cosmic hallway with many doors, a period where the consciousness, stripped of its physical body, navigates a series of intense visions that are ultimately projections of its own mind. The ultimate goal is not to find a paradise, but to recognize the true nature of these visions as illusions, thereby achieving liberation from the cycle of rebirth altogether. The journey through the Bardo is famously guided by a text known as the Bardo Thodol, or the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is not a book of spells, but a manual to be read aloud to the deceased by a lama or a loved one. Its words are a compassionate roadmap, a voice in the darkness explaining each bewildering stage. The first stage after the dissolution of the body's elements is the Chikhai Bardo, the Bardo of the moment of death. Here, the consciousness is said to encounter the clear light of reality, a dazzling, pure emptiness that is the fundamental nature of mind itself. This is the critical first chance for liberation. If the consciousness can recognize this radiant light as its own true nature, it can merge with it and achieve enlightenment, bypassing further suffering and rebirth entirely. But for almost everyone, this recognition is missed, obscured by lifetimes of habit and fear. The consciousness then faints, and when it reawakens, it enters the Chonyad Bardo, the Bardo of experiencing reality. This is where the journey becomes a profound and often terrifying psychological drama. Over a series of days, the consciousness is confronted with a sequence of visions. First come the peaceful deities, radiant figures of compassion and wisdom emanating from the heart. They appear in pairs, surrounded by blinding light. The guiding voice of the text urges the deceased not to be afraid, to recognize these beings as expressions of their own enlightened potential. But if fear and attachment cause the consciousness to flee from the intense peace, the visions shift. The wrathful deities emerge, towering, monstrous figures adorned with skulls and flames, dancing in a frenzy amidst a thunderous cacophony. These are not external demons, but the same enlightened energies now appearing in a fierce form, representing the power to cut through ignorance. The text coaches the listener, explaining that these terrifying apparitions are still just reflections, like images in a mirror. If you can face them without fear or aversion, understanding they are your own mind, liberation is still possible. Failing that, the consciousness, desperate for solidity and familiar comfort, enters the Sidpa Bardo, the Bardo of seeking rebirth. Now the pull of karma becomes overpowering. The consciousness experiences illusory sensations, feeling phantom winds, hearing the cries of loved ones, and seeing visions of potential parents in passionate union. It is drawn magnetically toward a rebirth that matches its karmic imprint. The guidebook now offers urgent advice, instructing the consciousness to choose a rebirth in a favorable realm where it can continue spiritual practice and to avoid entering a womb out of jealousy or desire. The entire 49-day process is a race against spiritual habit. Every vision, whether blissful or horrific, is a test of recognition. The bardo is a state of amplified mental projection where every latent tendency, every fear, every attachment manifests with immediate and overwhelming force. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is therefore the ultimate act of compassionate preparation, a set of instructions studied in life so that in death, when the mind is at its most vulnerable and powerful, a familiar voice might cut through the chaos with a simple, liberating reminder: do not be afraid, none of this is real. Recognize the nature of your own mind. This legend transforms the afterlife from a fixed destination into a dynamic, interactive process of consciousness itself, where the only judge, jailer, and potential liberator is you. The psychological labyrinth of the bardo is a journey inward, but some underworlds are hidden in plain sight, woven into the very landscape of legend. In the mists of Arthurian romance, we find a place that is neither a pit nor a paradise, but an island of suspended time, Avalon. This is the legendary isle where the mortally wounded King Arthur was taken after the Battle of Camlan, carried away on a barge by mysterious women to have his wounds healed. Avalon, the Isle of Apples, is not a Christian heaven or hell, but a direct descendant of the older Celtic otherworld, a place where the normal rules of life and death are held in abeyance. It is a realm of profound healing and rest, but also of waiting, for legend says Arthur does not die there but sleeps to return one day when Britain needs him most. This transforms the underworld from a final destination into a hidden retreat, a sanctuary where heroes are preserved, not buried, and where history itself can pause. The power of Avalon lies in its ambiguity. It is simultaneously a hospital, a tomb, and a throne room of future hope, all shrouded in the perpetual mist that separates the mortal world from the timeless one. This idea of a hidden, parallel world just beyond sight is deeply rooted in the pre-Arthurian beliefs of the Celts, in the concept of the Shia. These are the people of the mounds, often called the fairy folk, who are believed to dwell not in a distant underworld, but within the hollow hills, the ancient burial mounds and green hills that dot the countryside. These Shia mounds, or Shia, were considered direct portals to the otherworld, much like the older concept of Annwn. To enter a fairy mound was to step into a realm where time flowed differently, where a single night of feasting could translate to 100 years passing in the human world. The Shia themselves were not the tiny, whimsical sprites of later folklore, but powerful, majestic, and often dangerous beings, the remnants of the old gods and heroes who retreated into the landscape as newer beliefs arrived. Their halls within the hills were said to be splendid beyond imagining, filled with light, music, and everlasting youth, a direct echo of the Celtic paradise. Yet this proximity made them perilous, for the Shia could interact with the human world, stealing people away, initiating unsuspecting mortals into their timeless dances, or demanding respect for their territory. When the Arthurian legends crystallized in the medieval period, they absorbed and romanticized these ancient underworld themes. Avalon became the most famous Shia mound of all, an entire island governed by otherworldly women like Morgan Le Fay, whose name ties her to the fate and magic of the Shia. The Hollow Hills belief frames the underworld not as a vertical descent into darkness, but as a lateral step into a hillock, a subtle shift in perception. It suggests that the realm of the dead and the supernatural is not below us in a theological sense, but alongside us, hidden behind a veil of glamour in the very earth we walk upon. This is a profoundly intimate and mysterious vision. It means that any ancient barrow on a misty morning could be the doorway to a kingdom of eternal feasting, and that the great king of legend is not in a grave but sleeping in the next valley over, just out of sight. These stories ask us to reconsider the boundaries of our world. wondering if the sacred underworld is less a separate dimension and more a hidden frequency of reality, one we might stumble into when the conditions are just right or when our need for healing or wonder is greatest. But a prison of mist and hidden hills is a gentle confinement compared to the ultimate prison. For a radical branch of early Christians known as the Gnostics, the entire cosmos was the sacred underworld. This material universe, the earth beneath our feet and the stars above our heads, was not the glorious creation of a benevolent God, but a flawed, even malevolent construct, a spiritual prison designed to keep humanity ignorant and enslaved. The architects of this cosmic jail were not gods, but ignorant and arrogant beings called the archons, from the Greek word for ruler. These were the demiurges, the craftsmen of the physical world, who believed they were the ultimate powers but were themselves products of a profound error, emanations from a fractured divine realm. They shaped the gritty, heavy substance of matter and crafted the human body as a perfect trap, a tomb of flesh designed to house and forget a stolen treasure. That treasure was the divine spark, the pneuma, a fragment of the true, transcendent God, the unknowable source of all light and spirit, which the Gnostics called the pleroma, or the fullness. According to their secret gospels, like the Apocryphon of John, the chief archon, often named Yaldabaoth, was blind and boastful. After fashioning the material world, he declared to his fellow rulers, "I am a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me." This was the ultimate lie, the foundational deception. Humanity, then, was a sleeping divinity, a king amnesiac in a dungeon built by inferior gods who themselves did not know the true layout of the castle. So if this world is the prison, what is salvation? It is not forgiveness of sins or faith in a sacrificial God. It is gnosis. This Greek word does not mean intellectual knowledge, but a direct experiential knowing, a shocking awakening to the truth of one's own origin and nature. It is the moment the prisoner remembers they are the emperor's lost child, and that the warden's rules are meaningless. This gnosis is delivered by a revealer, often identified as the true spiritual Christ, who descends from the pleroma not to die for sins, but to bypass the archons entirely, bringing the secret knowledge that can liberate the spark within. The journey of the soul after death, in this view, becomes a harrowing ascent through the celestial spheres, each one governed by a different archon who guards the passage upward with passwords and illusions. The soul, armed with the gnosis learned in life, must recite the correct invocations, reject the false allure of the planetary rulers, and strip away the layers of material attachment until it finally shatters the ceiling of the fake cosmos and rejoins the boundless light of the pleroma. This is perhaps the most radical inversion of all the underworld legends. It does not place the sacred realm below or across the sea, but entirely outside the created universe. The true heaven is not up in the sky because the sky itself is part of the prison wall. Salvation is not an entry into a better world, but a total escape from the only world most people believe is real. The Gnostic legend asks a question that reverberates with a terrifying and exhilarating loneliness. What if the greatest sacred mystery is not about finding your place in the cosmos, but realizing the entire cosmos is a lock and you have always held the key? The Gnostics' cosmic prison made the entire world a cage, but other legends suggest the deepest truths are not meant to be escaped but retrieved. From the very same Mesopotamian soil that gave us the silent dust of Urkala comes a startlingly different story, one of gifts from the deep. This is the legend of the Apkallu, the 7 sages who did not reside in the underworld but ascended from it to build the world above. Long before the Great Flood swept over Sumer, humanity lived in a primitive state without cities, laws, or the arts of civilization. The gods looked upon this raw, struggling world and decided to intervene, not with thunder from the heavens, but with wisdom from the waters. They sent the Apkallu. These were not gods, but primordial beings of immense knowledge, often described as part human, part fish. Their home was the Abzu, the vast subterranean ocean of fresh water that lay beneath the earth, which was also the dwelling place of the god of wisdom, Enki. The Abzu was not a place of the dead, but the source of all life and creative potential, a deep, dark reservoir of knowing. From this watery abyss, the Apkallu emerged, dripping with the wisdom of the deep. Their mission was nothing less than the foundation of human society. Each sage was said to have served as an advisor to the antediluvian kings, the rulers who reigned before the flood. They taught humanity the sacred templates, the Mi, which were the divine decrees for all aspects of civilized life. Imagine these fishmen sages moving through the early cities, instructing people in arts that must have seemed like magic. They taught the correct rituals for temple construction, turning piles of mud brick into houses for the gods. They revealed the secrets of agriculture, how to read the seasons and irrigate fields from the very Abzu they came from. They brought the knowledge of writing, transforming vague thoughts into permanent marks on clay tablets. They instructed in law, medicine, and even the craft of making music. In essence, they pulled order from the primal chaos, drawing up a blueprint for society from the dark, creative waters below. This legend creates a profound inversion of our typical underworld narrative. The Abzu is not a destination for souls, but a source. The beings associated with it are not gods or judges, but teachers. The sacred underworld, in this context, is not about punishment or rest, but about foundational knowledge. It suggests that the roots of civilization itself, everything that separates human culture from mere survival, are not inventions of human genius, but gifts recovered from a primordial, submerged intelligence. The Apkallu served as conduits, bridging the profound, unseen wisdom of the deep earth with the bustling, sunlit world of humans. Their story, however, is framed by an ending as significant as their beginning. The Apkallu's work was completed before the Great Flood, the cataclysm sent by the gods to wipe humanity clean. After the waters receded, the text known as the Bit Messeri states that the Apkallu were recalled and pure ones were allowed into the land, implying a shift from divinely appointed sages to human priests and scholars. Yet their legacy was believed to linger. Amulets and figurines depicting the fishman Apkallu were buried in the foundation boxes of buildings and homes for centuries, a tangible link to that primordial wisdom, meant to protect the structure and its inhabitants by invoking the stabilizing power of the first sages. They became guardians of the very civilization they helped create, their forms embedded in its foundations, a silent reminder that the order of our world is anchored in mysteries that rise, not fall, from the sacred dark. While the Gnostics saw the cosmos as a prison, a secret society in ancient Greece offered a detailed escape plan. Among the crowded pantheon of gods and the rigid geography of Hades, a different, more hopeful whisper circulated, passed in hushed tones at night in secluded groves. This was the promise of the Orphic Mysteries, a clandestine religious movement that dared to rewrite the rules of the soul's journey. Unlike the common Greek belief in a fixed, dreary afterlife, the Orphics taught something revolutionary, that the human soul is divine, a fragment of the gods themselves, but tragically fallen and imprisoned within the body. They saw life not as a single path to Hades, but as a painful cycle, a wheel of reincarnation where the soul was doomed to be born again and again into mortal suffering, forgetting its celestial origin each time. The body was a tomb, a soma sema as they famously said, and death was not an end but merely the turn of the wheel leading to another life of toil and forgetfulness. For most people, this cycle was eternal and inescapable, but the Orphics claimed to hold the key. Through a series of secret initiation rites, purifications, and a strict way of life that often included vegetarianism and abstaining from certain foods like beans, an initiate could prepare their soul for the ultimate test in the afterlife. Their map of Hades was not the common one of judges and grey meadows. It was a landscape of critical choices. Upon death, the Orphic soul would descend into the underworld, but it carried with it the knowledge from its initiation. It would come to a fork in the shadowy path. On one side lay the pool of Lethe, the river of forgetfulness that all ordinary souls drank from, ensuring they entered their next life with a blank slate, perpetuating the cycle of ignorance. But on the other side, shimmering in the gloom, was the pool of Mnemosyne, the pool of memory. This was the crux of the entire Orphic promise. An initiated soul, trained and purified, would know to avoid Lethe at all costs. Instead, it would approach the guardians of Mnemosyne and recite specific passwords and hymns learned during life, proving its identity as an Orphic initiate. Upon doing so, it would be permitted to drink the cool, dark waters of memory. This was not a draught of oblivion, but of awakening. Drinking from Mnemosyne meant the soul would remember everything, its divine origin, its past lives, and the sacred knowledge of the mysteries. This memory was its ticket out of the cycle. Armed with this eternal recollection, the soul could then present itself before the rulers of the dead not as a common shade, but as a purified being. It would be judged worthy of a different destination, not the asphodel meadows, but the blessed fields of Elysium. In the Orphic vision, Elysium was not just a pleasant reward, it was liberation. Here, the soul would live forever in blissful peace, free from the wheel of rebirth, finally reunited with the divine essence from which it had been severed. The Orphic mysteries transformed the afterlife from a passive fate into an active achievement. It placed the power squarely in the hands of the individual through their choices in life and their knowledge in death. Their legend asks a haunting question that still resonates. What if the greatest threat to your eternity is not punishment, but simply forgetting who you truly are? Memory was the Orphic key to escaping the cycle, but for the mightiest king who ever lived, no key could be forged. The Epic of Gilgamesh, carved on clay tablets millennia ago, presents a different kind of underworld quest, one that does not seek to enter the land of the dead, but to conquer the very idea of death itself. Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, is 2/3 god and 1/3 man, a being of such immense strength and pride that he seems to defy mortal limits. But when his beloved friend Enkidu, wild and human, dies a painful death from illness, Gilgamesh is shattered. He watches the life leave Enkidu's eyes, sees the body grow cold and still, and is consumed by a terror he has never known. For the first time, the god-king truly understands that he too will die. This realization sparks not acceptance but a furious, desperate rebellion. He abandons his throne, tears his royal robes, and lets his hair grow wild, setting out on a mad quest to find the one man said to have cheated death, Utnapishtim, the survivor of the Great Flood. This journey takes him to the very ends of the earth, and along the way he receives a series of stark lessons about the nature of life and the underworld's inevitability. His first guide is the alewife Siguri, who keeps a tavern at the edge of the world by the Great Sea. When she sees the ragged, grief-stricken king approaching, she bars her door in fear. But Gilgamesh convinces her of his identity and his mission. Siguri, in her wisdom, offers him not a map but a profound piece of advice. She tells him that the quest for eternal life is futile, that the gods allotted death to mankind and kept life for themselves. Instead, she urges him to embrace the joys that are within his reach. Fill your belly with good food, she says. Dance and be merry, feast and rejoice. Let your clothes be clean, let your head be washed, bathe in water. Cherish the little child who holds your hand, and let your wife delight in your embrace. This is the work of mankind. It is a beautiful, heartbreaking plea for him to find meaning in the mortal world, to accept the feast of life because the banquet does not last forever. But Gilgamesh, deafened by his grief and fear, cannot hear her. He insists on crossing the lethal waters of death. Siguri, seeing his resolve, finally directs him to Urshanabi, the ferryman who can take him across. To reach Utnapishtim, Gilgamesh must then travel through the most terrifying physical representation of the underworld in the epic, the Tunnel of the Sun. This is a 12-league passage of utter darkness, a place where no light penetrates, where the sun itself makes its journey from west to east during the night. It is a place of primal terror where the cries of scorpion men guard the entrance. Gilgamesh, in his desperation, runs through this impossible blackness for what feels like an eternity, emerging just before the sun catches him and burns him to ashes. This tunnel is not the land of the dead, but a traversal of the cosmic machinery that separates the living world from the secret place where an immortal man hides. It is a trial by absolute darkness, a metaphor for the terrifying unknown that Gilgamesh is willing to brave. When he finally stands before Utnapishtim, the ancient flood hero, he demands the secret. Utnapishtim listens, then poses a simple, devastating question. He asks Gilgamesh why he struggles so against the common fate, pointing out that no human, not even the greatest king, can build a house that lasts forever. He then reveals the story of the flood, a secret history of the gods' near destruction of humanity, and his own reward of immortality, a unique event that can never be repeated. To test Gilgamesh's worthiness, Utnapishtim challenges him to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights, a simple test of overcoming the brother of death, sleep. Gilgamesh fails instantly, falling into a deep slumber the moment he sits down. The piles of bread Utnapishtim's wife bakes each day, growing progressively stale, become a tangible calendar of his failure, proving he cannot even conquer exhaustion, let alone eternity. In a final act of pity, Utnapishtim's wife persuades her husband to give the king a consolation prize, the location of a magical plant at the bottom of the sea that can restore youth. Gilgamesh dives deep, retrieves the plant, and begins his journey home triumphant. But in a moment of cruel, perfect irony, he stops to bathe in a cool pool, leaving the plant on the shore. A serpent slithers up, steals the plant, sheds its skin, and vanishes. Gilgamesh is left sitting on the bank, weeping. He has held the answer in his hands and lost it to the most ancient, grounded of creatures. The serpent's renewal through shedding its skin is a kind of rebirth, a natural cycle forever denied to the king. The journey ends with Gilgamesh returning to Uruk empty-handed. He points out the mighty walls of his city to Urshanabi the ferryman, telling him to admire their enduring brickwork. This is the epic's final, bleak wisdom. Gilgamesh did not find immortality for the body, but in building something that lasts beyond a single lifetime, in creating a legacy of civilization, he finds a different kind of permanence. The Underworld in this legend is not a place you can raid or outwit. It is the shadow that gives shape to the light. Sijuri's advice, the failure of the sleep test, the stolen plant, all point to the same truth. The sacred work is not to live forever, but to live fully within the beautiful, fragile bounds you have been given. The walls of Uruk stand not as a monument to a king's victory over death, but as a testament to what mortals can build while accepting the inevitable dark. Gilgamesh's quest for eternal life ended at the walls of his city, but other legends feared what might crawl back from the grave. Across the villages of Eastern Europe, a different kind of underworld took shape, not a distant kingdom for souls, but a corrupt, parallel existence festering just beneath the soil. This was the realm of the undead, a shadowy inversion of the sacred underworld, populated by vampires, strigoi, and revenants. These were not spirits who had journeyed on, but beings trapped in a horrific middle state, clawing their way back into the world of the living. Their existence spoke to a primal terror that death might not be a clean departure, but a corrupt transformation, and that the earth itself could become a womb for monstrosity. The creation of a vampire was rarely about sin in a religious sense, but about a profound disruption of the natural order. A person who died a sudden, violent death, who committed suicide, who was unbaptized, or who was born with a caul, a piece of the amniotic sac over their face, was considered at risk. The soul, in these cases, was believed to be unable or unwilling to fully depart, leaving the body animated by a malevolent, hungry force. This being did not reside in a mythic land like Hades or Duat. It inhabited a localized, personal underworld, its own coffin and the earth immediately surrounding it. The vampire's connection to the earth was fundamental and sinister. By day, it was forced to sleep in its grave, drawing a perverse sustenance from the soil of its homeland. This was not the fertile, generative earth of Ukupacha, but a polluted ground corrupted by the presence of an unnatural tenant. The vampire was a parasite on the very landscape, and its influence bled outward. Folklore told of livestock suddenly dying, crops withering, and mysterious illnesses sweeping through households, all signs that something was poisoning the land from below. To prevent this horrifying return, communities developed an elaborate arsenal of apotropaic or preventative burial practices. These rituals were a physical argument against the corruption of the grave. A body might be buried face down so that if it tried to dig its way out, it would only go deeper into the earth. Sharp objects like scythes or sickles were placed beside the neck to decapitate the corpse if it sat up. Poppy seeds or millet might be scattered in the coffin, the belief being that the obsessive, compelled vampire would have to count every single seed before leaving, a task that would take until dawn. In some regions, the corpse was staked through the heart, not with wood but with iron or steel, materials believed to have purifying properties. The stake did not kill the vampire, it pinned it to the earth, re-anchoring the restless body to the ground and preventing its escape. Even more extreme measures involved complete bodily destruction, decapitation with the head placed between the legs, or burning the remains and scattering the ashes in running water. Each act was a desperate effort to reinforce the boundary that death was supposed to create, to ensure the body stayed still and the soul moved on. The vampire legend, therefore, is a dark mirror to the hopeful journeys we have seen. It reflects a terror not of judgment or oblivion, but of stagnation and reversal. The sacred underworlds offered paths forward, even if they were difficult, but the undead underworld was a cul-de-sac of eternal hunger. The vampire was not being punished for its life. It was trapped by the circumstances of its death, becoming a predator on the community that buried it. This folklore gave tangible form to the fear that death could be incomplete, that the grave was not a seal but a fragile lid, and that the things we put into the earth might not stay where we put them. It asked a chilling question that haunted every cemetery. What if the true horror isn't what waits for us in the afterlife, but what refuses to leave this one? The vampire's grave was a prison of corrupted earth, but for the shaman, the underworld was a territory to be traversed with skill and courage. Across continents and cultures, from the frozen tundra of Siberia to the steaming heart of the Amazon, a singular figure has always dared to walk where others could only fear to go, the shaman. This is not a legend of a place, but a legend of a practice, a sacred and perilous job description, the journey to the land of the dead to negotiate, to heal, and to retrieve what was lost. The shaman acts as a living bridge between the world of the community and the spirit realms, and their most critical, dangerous work often lies in the depths below. Their purpose is direct and vital. A soul might have been stolen by a malevolent spirit, leaving a person sick and fading. A vital piece of knowledge, a cure for a new plague, might be held by the ancestors. The shaman's duty is to go down, find it, and bring it back. The method of travel is not a physical descent into a cave, though such places might serve as portals. The true vehicle is the shaman's own consciousness, launched into an ecstatic trance. In Siberia, the homeland of the word shaman itself, this journey is orchestrated with a specific rhythmic key, the steady, hypnotic beat of a drum. The drum is not merely an instrument, it is the shaman's horse. Sitting in the dim light of a tent or a yurt, the shaman begins to play, the repetitive rhythms syncing with their own heartbeat, pulling their awareness away from the ordinary world. As the trance deepens, the drumbeat becomes the sound of hooves galloping across the steppe, then down into a crack in the earth. The shaman's spirit rides this sonic steed down a cosmic river or through a tunnel, often visualized as the roots of the world tree descending through layered spirit worlds. Each realm has its own landscapes and inhabitants, and the shaman must navigate them with precise songs, gestures, and offerings learned over a lifetime of training. The goal is to reach the lowest realm, the land of the dead, and there parley with its rulers. Perhaps they must wrestle a soul back from a spirit who captured it, or bargain with an ancestor for a healing song. The danger is constant, for if the shaman's spirit is captured or loses its way, the physical body back in the tent will sicken and die, its soul stranded forever in the depths. This same pattern of a trained specialist voyaging into the spirit world to fight for the health of the community echoes powerfully in the Amazon rainforest. Here, the vehicle is not a drum, but a brew, the potent, visionary tea known as ayahuasca. The shaman, or ayahuasquero, after careful dieting and preparation, drinks the bitter liquid. Its effect is a violent purgative journey, not a gentle ride on a drum horse. The shaman may vomit, shake, and sweat, their physical distress a sign of the spiritual battle beginning. In the visions that follow, they see the hidden layers of reality. They might encounter giant anacondas, jaguars, or shimmering bird spirits, all teachers or adversaries. Sickness is often perceived as a spiritual intrusion, a dart or a poison sent by a sorcerer. To heal a patient, the shaman must journey into this visionary underworld, locate the source of the intrusion, and remove it, perhaps by sucking it out in the physical world or by battling the attacking spirit in the vision. The plants themselves are seen as sentient beings with their own knowledge, and the ayahuasca brew is the vine of the dead, a direct conduit to the spirit realm where the plant teachers reside. The shaman's courage lies in submitting to this terrifying, beautiful chaos, navigating its terrors to extract the precise information or power needed to mend a broken soul back in the village. Even the mighty Norse pantheon, with its golden Valhalla and icy Helheim, has a place for this archetype. The god Odin himself is the ultimate shamanic figure. He is not just a king of gods, he is a seeker of hidden wisdom, and he acquires it through terrifying underworld journeys. In the poem Baldur's Drama, Odin wishes to know why his son Baldur is having nightmares of his own death. To learn the truth, he does not summon a council. He saddles his 8-legged horse Sleipnir and rides down the road to Helheim itself. He reaches the grave of a dead seeress, a Völva, and with powerful chants, he awakens her from her eternal sleep, forcing her to rise and speak the prophecies of the underworld. She reluctantly tells him of Baldur's impending doom, a truth that comes from the land of the dead. This is a classic shamanic act, the descent to consult with the dead for knowledge unavailable to the living. Odin's other great sacrifice for wisdom is even more direct. He hangs himself on the world tree, Yggdrasil, pierced by his own spear for 9 nights. In this ritual self-sacrifice, a symbolic death, he descends into the underworld of his own being and returns with the secret of the runes. He trades a part of himself, his comfort and safety, for the power to see and shape fate. These myths canonize the shaman's peril. The price of knowledge is always a piece of the seeker's own soul, and the road to the underworld is paved with personal sacrifice. Whether through drum, brew, or symbolic death, the shamanic underworld journey presents a universal truth that healing and wisdom often reside in the very places we fear most, and that some individuals are called to brave that darkness, not for their own glory, but to bring back light and wholeness for everyone else. The shaman's journey is a personal ordeal for hidden truths, but what if the underworld was a vast, impersonal machine designed to demonstrate the mathematics of justice itself? In the heart of ancient Greek philosophy, Plato offered not a myth of gods and monsters, but a chillingly rational vision of the afterlife, a cosmic mechanism laid out in the final book of the Republic. This is the myth of a story presented not as religious dogma, but as a philosophical allegory of breathtaking scope, intended to illustrate the ultimate consequences of how we live. Was a soldier left for dead on a battlefield. His body, however, did not decay. After 12 days, as it lay upon the funeral pyre, he suddenly awoke and told a story of where his soul had been. He described a journey to a mysterious place where there were two openings in the earth and two corresponding openings in the sky above. Judges sat between them, delivering verdicts. Righteous souls, their verdicts tied to their backs, were directed to the right-hand opening in the sky, ascending to a celestial reward. Unjust souls were sent to the left-hand opening in the earth, descending for 1,000 years of torment, tenfold for every wrong they had committed. But Er's account did not end with simple reward and punishment, for this was merely the prelude to the main event. After 1,000 years in either bliss or suffering, the souls were brought back to a common gathering place, a vast, luminous plain. Here they would share their experiences, those from above speaking of indescribable beauty, and those from below weeping, recounting the horrors they had endured. This period of storytelling served a crucial purpose. It was a communal lesson in cause and effect, a stark reminder that every action echoes across a millennium. Then came the moment of profound, terrifying freedom. The souls were led before the three fates, the daughters of necessity, Lachesis, who sings of the past, Clotho, who spins the present, and Atropos, who cuts the future. At the center of everything stood the spindle of necessity, a brilliant, whirling model of the cosmos itself. Its shaft was driven through the center of the universe, and on its wall, like nested bowls, revolved the 8 concentric circles of the planets and fixed stars, each singing a unique harmonic note, together forming the music of the spheres. This was the machinery of fate, turning with perfect mathematical precision. A prophet then stepped forward and scattered lots and samples of lives onto the ground before the assembled souls. The lots determined the order in which each soul would choose its next life. The choice, however, was entirely their own. This is the philosophical heart of the myth. The souls, clutching the lessons of their previous millennium, now had to select the blueprint for their next mortal existence from the patterns scattered before them. The patterns represented every conceivable life, from a tyrant to a modest artisan, from a glorious athlete to an anonymous farmer. Plato describes a haunting and instructive scene. A soul who had previously lived a good life out of habit and unexamined virtue, not true philosophy, often chose poorly, lured by the apparent power of a tyrant's life without understanding the corruption and misery inherent within it. The soul of the legendary warrior Ajax, still bitter from his past life, chose the life of a lion, refusing to be a human again. The soul of the buffoon, the Scythes, picked the life of a monkey. Most tragically, a soul who had come from 1,000 years of celestial reward, having never experienced suffering, would often choose a terrible life out of sheer carelessness or naivete. The choice was final and binding. After selecting a life, each soul then approached Lachesis, who approved the choice, then to Clotho, who spun the thread of that destiny, and finally to Atropos, who made it irreversible. The soul was now committed. The final step was a march across the barren, burning plain of Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Every soul was required to drink a certain measure of its water. Those who were not wise, who drank too deeply, forgot everything, the lessons of the past millennium, the reason for their choice, their previous existence entirely. They would plunge into their new life with no memory, doomed to repeat their mistakes. Only a philosopher, Plato suggests, guided by reason and a love of truth, would drink sparingly, retaining some crucial memory of the good, and thus navigate the new life with greater wisdom. The myth of presents the underworld not as a final resting place, but as a grand, cyclical classroom. Its purpose is pedagogical, to teach the soul through direct experience and consequence. The spindle of necessity represents the unbreakable laws of cause and effect that govern the universe, a cosmic order that is beautiful, harmonic, and utterly indifferent. Our freedom lies not in breaking those laws, but in the choices we make within them. The myth's chilling message is that we are, in a very real sense, the architects of our own fate, not just in one life, but across the vast spans of eternity, and that the most important knowledge we can carry from one world to the next is the memory of what truly makes a life good or wretched. Plato's cosmic classroom was built on reason, but the most terrifying and enduring map of the underworld was drawn from the ink of poetic fury. Dante Alighieri's Inferno is more than a poem. It is the single most influential blueprint for hell in the Western imagination, a meticulous, horrifying, and deeply personal architecture of divine justice. Written in the early 14th century, it transforms the abstract doctrine of eternal punishment into a visceral, guided tour. Dante himself is the pilgrim, lost in a dark wood of midlife crisis and spiritual confusion, and his guide is none other than the Roman poet Virgil, a symbol of human reason. Together, they descend into the pit. Dante's hell is not a flat plain or a silent city, but a vast funnel-shaped cavern that narrows as it plunges deeper into the earth, divided into 9 concentric circles. This structure is not random, it is a moral taxonomy. The sins punished higher up are those of incontinence like lust, gluttony, and wrath, where human desire overflows its proper bounds. Deeper down lie the circles for violence against others, against self, and against God and nature. At the very bottom, frozen in ice, are the sinners guilty of fraud and treachery, the most grievous offenses because they misuse the uniquely human gift of reason to deceive. Each punishment is a contrapasso, a poetic justice where the sin itself becomes the instrument of eternal torment. The lustful who were swept away by passion are now forever buffeted by a howling whirlwind. The gluttonous who wallowed in excess lie in a freezing slush of putrid rain and hail. The fortune-tellers who try to see too far ahead have their heads twisted backward so they can only look behind them. These are not just torments, they are crystallized metaphors. The inhabitants are not faceless masses, but vivid, tragic individuals. In the circle of the lustful, Dante meets Paolo and Francesca, lovers who were slain after their adulterous affair was discovered. Their story is so heartbreakingly told, of love sparked by reading a book about Lancelot, that Dante the pilgrim faints from pity. Yet they are here in hell because their love was illicit and destructive, a passion that overruled all moral law. Their eternal union in the wind is both their punishment and a twisted reflection of their uncontrollable desire. Deeper still, in the very ice of treachery, Dante encounters Count Ugolino, frozen with his head embedded in the skull of Archbishop Ruggieri, the man who betrayed him. In life, Ugolino was locked in a tower with his sons and grandsons to starve to death. In hell, he is forever gnawing on the head of his betrayer, a perfect contrapasso for one who consumed the flesh of his own children in his desperation. His story is one of the most chilling passages in all literature, a portrait of betrayal that breeds an endless, cannibalistic hatred. Dante's genius was to populate his theological framework with human faces and unforgettable stories, making the abstraction of sin feel agonizingly personal. The impact of this vision cannot be overstated. For centuries, it defined how artists, writers, and even theologians pictured hell. Its imagery seeped into paintings by Botticelli and Doré, into the works of Milton and later poets, and into the very language of damnation. The Inferno gave the underworld a specific geography, a dreadful logic, and an emotional power that doctrine alone could never achieve. It asked a question that still echoes when divine justice is rendered not as a simple fire, but as a perfect poetic mirror of our own choices. Which circle would hold your reflection? The cold, rational geometry of Dante's hell and Plato's cosmic spindle may feel like relics, yet their blueprints have been smuggled into the very stories we watch for entertainment. Our ancient dread of the underworld did not vanish. It simply changed its costume, finding new labyrinths in the flicker of the silver screen and the pages of modern myth. These new legends repackage our oldest questions, not with gods and ferrymen, but with computer code, neon alleys, and heroes wielding celestial powers against a bureaucracy they never asked to join. Consider the dystopian underworlds of films like The Matrix and Dark City. These are not realms for the dead, but prisons for the living. The Matrix itself is a direct descendant of the Gnostic nightmare, a constructed reality built by unseen architects to keep humanity pacified and ignorant, their bodies used as batteries in a silent, mechanical Hades. The real world, a scorched desert under a dead sky, is a kind of bleak asphodel meadows, a grim truth that most would reject for the comforting illusion. To take the red pill is to undergo a shamanic descent, to be unplugged and reborn into a painful awareness, much like the soul awakening to the harsh light of the bardo. Dark City takes this further, its inhabitants trapped in a city that is literally rewritten every night by pale, vampiric beings called the Strangers. This is an underworld of stolen memories and manipulated identities, a direct echo of the river Lethe, where your past and your very self can be erased by external rulers. The hero's quest in both films is not to reach paradise but to break the system, to expose the lie and reclaim a stolen reality, a very modern take on the hero twins conquering Xibalba through superior knowledge. Even our popcorn blockbusters are steeped in this ancient brew. The Percy Jackson series does not discard Hades, it rebrands him. Here, the Greek underworld is a functioning, if gloomy, civil service with security lines, bureaucratic receptionists, and a lord of the dead who is more exasperated office manager than fearsome tyrant. This modernization makes the archetype accessible, but the core remains. The underworld is a place of judgment and finality, a maze where heroes must bargain and battle to retrieve what was lost. Television shows like Supernatural treat hell as a recurring workplace hazard. It is a hierarchical, corporate structure of demons, tortures, and deals, where the ultimate currency is not coins for Charon, but 10-year contracts for a human soul. This framing turns the ancient fear of eternal punishment into a legalistic, almost mundane transaction, reflecting our modern anxieties about debt, contracts, and fine print that binds you forever. Yet beneath the leather jackets and classic rock, the same old terror pulses, the fear that a single moment of weakness or desperation can condemn you to an eternity run by middle management demons. These stories prove that the sacred underworld is not a fixed location, but a fundamental story shape. It is the hidden layer, the true cost, the system behind the system. Whether it's a simulated reality, a memory-warping city, or a hell with paperwork, each modern legend asks the same questions first whispered in Sumerian dust. What is real? Who controls the rules? And what would you sacrifice to see the truth? They transform the afterlife from a distant theological concern into a present, pressing conspiracy. The call to adventure is no longer a descent into a physical cave, but a hack into the mainframe, a refusal to accept the world as presented. In doing so, they offer a peculiar kind of hope. If the underworld is a system, then like any system, it might just have a flaw, a backdoor, a hero who can learn its language and rewrite its cruel code from the inside. But the most profound underworlds are not built from code or celluloid, they are carved from stone and silence. For every legend of a shadowy kingdom below, there is a real, breathable darkness that first gave it shape, an architectural womb for our deepest fears. These are the archaeological underworlds, the actual tombs, catacombs, and necropolises where the line between the living and the dead becomes a physical corridor you can walk. They are not metaphors but foundations, the literal bedrock upon which our myths were built. To stand in one is to feel the chill of the imagined realm on your skin, to understand that every story of descent began with someone looking into a hole in the earth and wondering what waited inside. Consider the Valley of the Kings, a sun-scorched gorge on the west bank of the Nile, the land of the setting sun. Above ground, it appears as a barren, rocky landscape, silent except for the wind. But beneath that unassuming surface lies a honeycombed labyrinth, a network of tombs descending hundreds of feet into the limestone bedrock. This was the real Duat, the construction site for the Egyptian afterlife. To walk down the steep, descending corridors of a pharaoh's tomb is to physically enact the sun god Ra's nightly journey through the underworld. The walls blaze with painted spells from the Book of the Dead, a visual guide for the soul navigating the perils ahead. You pass through chambers representing the 12 hours of night, the air growing still and cool. Finally, you reach the burial chamber, a stone sarcophagus resting where the heart of the mountain should be. This precise, engineered descent transformed a spiritual concept into a tangible, navigable space. The tomb was not just a grave, it was a machine for rebirth, a physical vessel designed to propel the soul through the cosmic obstacles depicted on its walls. When the ancients spoke of the dangers of the underworld, they were describing, in part, the very real terror of being sealed in such a perfect, deep, and eternal darkness. Half a world away, another emperor orchestrated an underworld on a staggering, militaristic scale. The mausoleum of the first Qin emperor, guarded by the now famous terracotta army, is less a tomb and more a subterranean mirror of an entire imperial bureaucracy. The thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, each with unique facial features, are merely the outer garrison. Ancient texts describe the main tomb itself as a microcosmic universe, with ceilings inlaid with pearls for stars, rivers of flowing mercury, and booby traps set to kill any intruder. While the central chamber remains unexcavated, the message of the complex is clear. The underworld is not an abandonment of power, but its continuation. The emperor did not go to the land of the dead. He brought his court, his army, and his entire world down with him. This necropolis reframes the afterlife as a permanent occupation where authority extends beyond death, and the silent, clay-eyed army waits forever for a command that will never come. It is a vision of the underworld as a frozen empire, a testament to the human desire to take it all with you, to never truly relinquish the reins. But what of the common dead, those without armies or rivers of mercury? For them, the underworld was often a collective, anonymous city. Beneath the streets of modern Paris lies such a metropolis of bones, the catacombs. Originally ancient limestone quarries, they were converted in the late 18th century to solve a crisis of overflowing cemeteries. For years, under cover of night, bones were transported from parish graveries and meticulously stacked in the tunnels, creating walls of femurs and skulls that stretch for miles. To walk these passages is to experience a chillingly democratic underworld. Here, the remains of millions are stripped of identity, merged into a single, silent population. It is Urkala made real, a city of dust and calcium where the merchant and the maid, the noble and the beggar, are rendered equal in a geometric architecture of death. The catacombs present the underworld not as a mythic journey, but as a logistical problem, a physical space we must manage when the world of the living simply runs out of room. They are a stark, sobering reminder that beneath every great city of the living, there often rests another, built from what it has discarded. Yet the most direct inspiration for our underworld myths might be the oldest network of them all, the catacombs of Rome. These were not ossuaries, but the first underground cemeteries of the Christian community, dug in the soft volcanic rock outside the city walls. For early Christians practicing a faith that was often illegal, these tunnels served a dual purpose. They were a practical hiding place for burial rites, but they also became a powerful spiritual symbol. Descending into the cool, dark earth to bury a loved one among frescoes of biblical scenes felt like a literal descent into a sacred holding place, a precursor to resurrection. The catacombs shaped the very imagery of the afterlife, the long, dark corridor leading to a place of communal rest, guarded and sanctified. This physical experience of a community existing in the earth, of painting hopes on tomb walls in the flickering lamplight, made the concept of an underworld waiting room intensely real. It was here, in these cramped galleries, that the abstract notion of a realm of the dead began to solidify into a map that future legends would elaborate with judges, rivers, and demons. These real places force a simple, powerful question. Did we imagine our underworlds because we buried our dead? Or did we bury our dead in specific ways because we already imagined the underworlds? The truth likely pulses in the feedback loop between the two. The physical act of carving a tomb downward, of stacking bones in a dark pit, of painting salvation on a subterranean wall gave body to the ghost. It provided the setting, the atmosphere, the chilling sensation of descent that stories required to feel true. Every mythic gate had its echo in a tomb door sealed with stone, every guardian demon in the fear of what might lurk in the dark just beyond the lamp's glow. Archaeology shows us that our most sacred darknesses are not mere fantasies. They are the shadows cast by our own stonework, the stories we told ourselves to make sense of the profound, silent cities we have always built inevitably below our feet. The silent cities of bone and stone beneath our feet are more than just burial grounds. They are the physical blueprints for a psychological landscape we all share. Stepping back from these 30 timeless legends, a startling pattern emerges. Across continents and centuries, these sacred underworlds are not random nightmares, they are mirrors. Each one reflects a different facet of the human mind staring into the abyss of its own mortality. And in their terrifying symmetries, we see our deepest fears, our highest hopes, and our most persistent questions cast in mythic form. The first universal theme is the journey itself. From the Sumerian 7 gates to the Aztec 9 levels, the soul is almost never simply there. It must travel, struggle, and descend. This arduous path is a narrative representation of the psychological process of dying and grief, a transition so profound it cannot be instantaneous. It is the mind's way of processing the unimaginable, breaking the shock of non-existence into manageable, symbolic steps, a dark river to cross, a mountain to climb, a password to recite. We need the journey because the alternative, a sudden, absolute end, is too psychologically brutal to comprehend. Then, at the end of the road, we almost always meet the judge. Whether it is Osiris with his scales, Yama with his ledger, or the Christian God at the final reckoning, the underworld is a courtroom. This reveals a fundamental human craving for cosmic justice. The terrifying randomness of life and death, where the wicked prosper and the innocent suffer, is psychologically intolerable. We invent divine auditors to correct the balance, to ensure that every action has its equal and opposite reaction in a realm beyond corruption. The judge myth assures us that the universe is not indifferent, that moral order is woven into its very fabric, and that our choices have a weight that echoes into eternity. But we rarely face the judge or the journey alone. We create the guide, Charon the ferryman, the psychopomp dog of Mictlan, the shaman's drum, even Virgil leading Dante. These figures represent our desperate need for help. Facing the ultimate unknown, we instinctively seek an expert, a veteran of the borderlands who knows the rules. The guide is the embodiment of hope that we do not have to do this most difficult thing entirely by ourselves, that there is a protocol, a map, a whispered piece of advice that can see us through. They transform the chaotic terror of death into a procedure, something that can be learned, navigated, and survived with the right knowledge. And survival implies an outcome, which brings us to the twin pillars of punishment and reward. The boiling lakes and frozen pits, the Elysian fields and the field of reeds, these are not just divine incentives, they are externalizations of our own conscience. The punishment for the liar who has molten lead poured down their throat in Diu is the physical manifestation of the burning guilt they carried in life. The paradise of endless feasting in Pulatu is the dream of a hunger that is forever satisfied, a labor that is forever complete. We project our internal sense of guilt and our longing for peace onto a cosmic screen, creating a system where our inner turmoil or contentment becomes our outer reality for all time. Finally, there is the haunting theme of the return. Inanna comes back, though changed. Orpheus almost succeeds. Gilgamesh returns empty-handed but wiser. The shaman descends to bring back a healing soul. This motif speaks to our deepest denial and our greatest hope. We secretly wish that death is not a full stop but a comma, that something of us can come back, even if it is just knowledge or a story. The return is the mythic expression of legacy, of memory, of the part of us that remains in the world of the living through our deeds, our children, or the tales told about us. It is a refusal to accept total erasure. So what do these 30 mirrors held up in the sacred dark ultimately show us? They show a species desperately trying to make meaning out of the one certainty that defies all meaning. They reveal that our fear of death is inseparable from our love of life, that our demand for justice grows from our experience of injustice, and that our hope for renewal is born from watching the world itself die and be reborn with every winter and spring. These underworlds are not maps of places but diagrams of the human heart. They ask us, when you strip away everything, what do you believe is waiting? Is it a silent dust, a joyful reunion, a fair trial, or a school for your soul? Your answer says less about the universe and everything about who you are and what you hope in your deepest self to be. From the silent dust of Urkala to the whirling spindle of necessity, 30 timeless legends have painted the sacred dark in every color of the human soul. We have crossed rivers with coins and dogs, stood before scales and ledgers, and faced deities of decay, justice, and fertile silence. Each culture, in its own profound way, dug into the earth and found a different reflection staring back. The Sumerians saw a stark equality in dust, the Egyptians a moral courtroom, the Greeks a segmented bureaucracy of fate, and the Celts a misty island of apple blossoms just beyond the next wave. The Norse prepared their dead for an apocalypse, the Maya outwitted trickster lords, and the Polynesians charted a course back to the ancestral homeland. Some, like the Gnostics, believed the entire world was the prison, while others, like the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, saw the land itself as the living, dreaming body of the afterlife. This incredible diversity is a testament to the limitless creativity of the human spirit when confronted with the ultimate unknown. Yet for all their vivid differences, these underworlds whisper the same essential truths. They are all, in the end, about understanding life. We project our deepest fears of chaos and injustice into pits of punishment and courts of cosmic law. We pour our hopes for connection, peace, and continuity into fields of reeds, halls of ancestors, and the promise of a return. The sacred underworld is the story we tell about the value of a life, the memory we hope to leave, and the balance we crave in a universe that often feels random and unforgiving. These 30 legends are not maps of places we go, but mirrors of what we are. They ask us what we cherish, what we fear, and what we believe we deserve when the final gate swings shut. So now the question turns to you. After this journey through the roots of the world tree and the heart of the mountain, which of these hidden realms lingers in your mind? Does the solemn judgment of Osiris feel like a truth, or does the quiet dissolution of Mictlan seem more honest? Perhaps the shaman's courageous journey resonates, or the bureaucratic precision of Diyu strikes a chord. Share which timeless legend of the sacred underworld fascinates you most, and if you hunger for more explorations into the heart of history's greatest mysteries, be sure to subscribe. The past holds countless doors still waiting